So that's kind of odd. And so a couple of investigators and patrol people went over there, and I get a call on my cell phone, and it's Paul Williams, and Paul's done a show with us. And I'll never forget that, we're getting ready to get into the evening. We're still going to be working this for quite some time. At the same time, it's the end of the day, and you're starting to go on fumes a little bit. And I remember Paul said, Davey, he goes, we've got 2 more over here. And I said, 2 more what? And he goes, 2 more bodies.
Warning. The podcast you're about to listen to may contain graphic descriptions of violent assaults, murder, and adult language. Listener discretion is advised.
The Lexington triple homicide. Who really pulled the trigger? Part 1 of 3. Thank you for joining us as we discuss the triple murder committed by Ricky Sherroan, April 20th, 1999. I have with us David, as usual.
Exactly.
Thanks for being here, David.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those uncomfortable ones. We're going to talk about one of them that I worked myself, and they're weird. I know we've done a couple before, but we've got a fantastic guest to help walk us through the questions and stuff like that. But it's an interesting case. I think people will find it interesting.
Well, we indeed do have a really interesting guest. And I say interesting because he is a spider master for real. This is James. James, thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me here. It's great to be here.
James, I have to have you tell our listeners, you have your own podcast. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, we know, but why don't you tell the listeners about it?
Sure, I'd be happy to. It's called The 13th Floor, 13th podcast. And just look for the red, black, and white logo. We talk about spooky, paranormal, creepy, occult, conspiracy type stuff. And we do so pretty clean and with a more comedic angle. And my hosts, Alex and Cece, are always with me. And at the time of this recording, it's actually Cece's birthday. So
happy birthday,
happy
Cece.
birthday, Cece. Yeah, happy birthday.
Well, you have to tell because I'm always so intrigued. Give us a snippet of your spider infatuation.
Funny enough, I actually just bought a new one who hasn't come in the mail yet. And yes, they do come in the mail. And our listeners are actually encouraged to go on Instagram, 13th Floor Podcast at Instagram, and vote on what their name will be. They are a sun tiger, so black and orange. But yeah, I got 10 other tarantulas, and I'm obsessed with bugs. It's crazy.
Now, are these going to be babies or are these full-grown ones?
This one's going to be about an inch, so a baby.
So a baby.
Yeah.
Now, are these as poisonous as some of the others that you've told me you have?
This one's in between, which is rare. Usually the new worlds, it's like a bee sting, and then the old worlds, it's like you go to the ER. This one's in the middle, which is very rare. It's a new world, so it's not too bad, but it's worse than your typical new world. The upside is they don't have the urticating hairs that cause like contact dermatitis like most new worlds.
I think that you should give it like a really sweet name, like, Coco or Fluffy or something.
Funny enough, so far they're all just about named after beverages. So I'm probably going to try to keep with that trend with the poll on Instagram.
What kind of beverage?
Let's see. Oh, that's a good question because, she's going to be black and orange. So
your other beverages.
Oh, the other one's Julius after Orange Julius, pumpkin spice latte, noir, Pinot Noir, cider, oolong and puer, which are teas, chai, Indian spice tea, because she's from India, and so forth.
Well, how interesting.
I did, because I told you I was going to do this, but I did tell you that one day that he was going on vacation, and I said that you would, while I'm out of town, that he could bring his creatures over and you would sit them.
No way.
Yeah, I didn't think
There is no way. I don't even know what they eat.
Well, yeah.
Besides people.
Well, they talk about it on the 13th floor, but I have to pitch it and say it because that's how we met is through the podcast world. And I'm an avid fan, and you know that. And you know on our website, if anybody ever goes to it, I have a handful of select podcast reps that speak to me. And 13th Floor has been on there for a couple of years now.
Really appreciate that.
When you listen to the 13th Floor, I think what I like is I've said before is that you'll laugh, but you'll learn so much because what the whole premise is you all choose a topic And then sometimes the audience chooses a topic.
Yeah.
And then you all do some research, and Alex and Cece and you take turns stabbing at this thing. And it's one of my go-tos. You know that. And
thank you.
So I'm glad we can turn our listeners onto it. If our listeners like our stuff, you'll love the 13th Floor for sure. And then to get to work with you on a cross promo coming
definitely.
in and helping us out with a pretty interesting case in the true crime world. So welcome aboard. Welcome aboard.
Glad to be here.
Well, this is your case. There's several I've asked you to do. One I really want you to do, you still won't. But we have Ricky Sherroan here that we're talking about tonight. Yeah. He committed 3 murders on April 20th, and you, I guess, were the lead investigator.
The lead, but like we always talk about too, is that you lead only because it's your turn in the barrel, but anything that comes out of a unit like that is the effort of a lot of people. And a lot of people inside the agency or not. So lead, you pick them up because we've talked about the rotation before, and you get them. And sometimes you might spend more time on the stand, maybe. But I was up that day.
So what were you doing when they called you?
Well, actually, I was at work because it was during the week. So we were at work and got a phone call of a decedent found off of Reading Road on Bellmead, I believe it was, in Lexington. Yeah. And to set this up too, this is April the 20th, 1999, also known as 420 Day, which kind of plays a role in this a little bit. But so it's like anything else. You get the call to go to where this decedent or this person's been found dead. I want to back up a little bit about why this one might be kind of interesting to people, because the dynamics were interesting. Is we'll learn how it was like raking leaves on a windy day. You're already busy, and then you learn you've got other dead people, and those come into my situation because I'm still it, and we'll talk more about how that happens. So we'll talk about that. The idea that that's a really rare thing that you get 3 like that, especially in a fantastic city like Lexington, Kentucky. But the other dynamic we'll hear too is that the suspect Ricky, which by the way, we had charged him with 3 and went to trial, and he was found guilty of 2 out of the 3. And we'll talk a little bit about what that might have meant and what some of the prosecution and defense theories could have been on that. We still were adamant. That's why we did that. We had a good, strong prosecution theory on it. But what we're about to learn in a little bit is that Ricky's mother was in a horrible situation through this thing, and I'll describe how that is. And it's one of those things I think about to this year, how the family has dealt with more tragedy than they should have in any kind of case like this. So I wanted to set that back a little bit to that. So it's like anything else. We roll up, and you've got patrol at the scene, and they've been in the house, and they give you usually what happens. Somebody from patrol, they secure the scene. They'll give you a rundown of what they saw in there. And I think we've talked about before that sometimes we go in and sometimes we don't. It's not like TV. In this case, I didn't go in until after the victim, Frank Reschke, who is, I believe, in his 60s, was removed from there. We're real big on not contaminating that scene. So it's what we rely on, the statements and things of the people or ID will come out. Went into it later, when we'd had it done. But we learn is that Ricky had a sister that was still in school, and she got home from school and found the house was locked up and couldn't get in. And she waited for her mother to get home, and her mother managed to get in the house and found her husband, Frank Reschke, in a recliner. And he was obviously mortally wounded and dead. It ends up he'd been shot multiple times. And so she finds him in a recliner, and of course they call the police, and that initiates all of this, where your patrol shows up, and then they call us, they call the coroner, and it rolls. What's that look like when you're there is that we call the crime lab out. It's a big truck that has some equipment in it. They don't do a lot of testing in it. It's equipped for that, but it's mainly where you can huddle and everything. We get more investigators in the scene. Patrol is out doing what you've heard about on this show a million times before, called the neighborhood investigation, going door to door. Did you see or anything like that? Because it's obviously a super suspicious death. The coroner's called. Their staff comes out. They actually take control and possession of the body. I don't know. We've talked a little bit about when we interviewed a coroner here, but in Kentucky, the coroner, quote unquote, owns the body and responsible for it. Yeah.
It's kind of surreal.
It is. Yeah. It sounds weird, doesn't it? But I always like to break that down a little bit because it's a crime scene and we are going to investigate it, but they're actually charged with the responsibility of the death investigation. So in Kentucky, isn't that neat? People don't know that. And so what that is there's usually a strong relationship between a coroner's office and a police department because of the equipment and the expertise that's shared between the two. So, for example, we were not allowed to go in and move anybody or take anybody and move the body or anything like that till they're done. But it's actually, again, a teamwork effort. That expertise comes from both sides on that.
That really emphasizes the importance of the fact that coroners are elected. So yeah, don't vote for anybody you wouldn't trust with a body.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
Right.
and yeah, exactly. And we've interviewed Jessamine County coroner here was a fantastic and one of his fantastic deputy
his
coroners.
deputies, Cassie.
Yeah, exactly.
She's phenomenal.
And it was neat. We learned a lot in that too, in that whole thing. But yeah, that's their scene, the immediacy of that body's their scene, and a lot of people don't get that. But it works because they're educated. Way back in the day, in Kentucky, to be a coroner, you're elected, and you don't have to have a medical degree or anything like that. And ironically enough, a long time ago, a lot of coroners happen to be funeral directors, which always makes you. Could there be a conflict of interest? Maybe. I don't think that happened.
It sounds like a musical or something.
Yes, exactly. Like, wait a few more minutes, or I'm sorry that your husband's deceased. Here's a card. I don't know how that went, but in Kentucky, I'll speed it up a little bit. They're all exceptionally trained through this Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Arrest.
Pardon me?
And they can arrest.
They can arrest. Yeah, that's a small piece of. You don't see that.
I didn't
a lot.
realize that.
Yeah,
me
well,
neither.
they're peace officers, but you probably won't see that a whole lot. But
No, but
that
they
also
can.
it emphasizes the legal authority they have over that scene. That's why that's in there. So getting back to it is to set that up. What that looks like is you've got a house that's now contained. It's got crime scene tape. It's got an officer at the door with a log who's going to write down who goes in and what time they go in and what time they go out. We always joke that's how you keep the bosses out, because we don't want people traipsing through. So if you go on that list, you might wind up in court, and it keeps people out. But we don't. We want to reduce any chance of contaminating that. The forensics pulls up. They've got the big crime lab, and we're on hold. What we're on hold for is a warrant. There's a little bit of a pause in all of that because. In theory, you could get permission from the homeowner, from Mrs. Reschke, to consent voluntarily you can process the house, and that would probably stand up most all the time. But in a death investigation, we called it paper. Is you get an affidavit and you go to a judge, because that way, if anything changes, you have that probable cause that's been approved by a judge through that search warrant. That's what a lot of people don't know.
Interesting.
Well, that's time. You have to make it, and you have to find a judge. Usually, if they're not in chambers, they'll have them on call. I've been to judge's house at 3:30 in the morning. I've had a warrant signed at Rupp Arena at a circus, standing next to a popcorn machine. Another one, I remember I met with a judge down at A1A in downtown, and he was playing volleyball. So he steps off the sand for a minute, and I put my hand up, and people are like, "What is that?" It's and you do it. So it's wherever you find them. But what I'm getting at is that there's a pause. The house got looked at very quickly. When you have something like that, you do have the ability to make a sweep of the house. And what that's based on is that the police can go in to make sure the house is safe, to make sure there's no other victims of a crime, and that we don't have somebody hiding that would jump out when they start processing the house. But it's limited to that. If you see anything, so the serendipity, you can add it to a search warrant affidavit. But you can't, for example, to do that, I can't go in, or nobody can go in and start opening drawers and things, because most people can't hide in a drawer. And as short as I am, I still couldn't get in a drawer unless it was a really large drawer.
I've been trying to stick you in one.
Yeah.
We got a couple of things.
Yeah, I bet, exactly. So that's what it looks like, is you've got all that. So it looks like it's kind of on a freeze thing, and we're all waiting for the paper. Now, what happened that was interesting in that, too, is that in speaking to Mrs. Reschke, this is where you start to read things a little bit. is we learned that she has a son, which would be Frank's stepson, named Ricky Sherroan or Richard Sherroan.
About how old was
I'd have to look back, probably his early 20s. Yeah, late teens, early 20s. He was just turning into a young man. And when you're talking to her, I think most of us started to sense that intuition-wise and the way she was, is that something was really heavy on her mind, and the idea that he's not home, Frank's car is gone. And we learned later that there'd been some friction between the two in that relationship a little bit. And this is what I talked about her being in a tight place, is that we didn't overly focus on him right away, but it was pretty clear that we had to locate Ricky. Ricky, he's got to be in or out so fast it's not funny. When I'm in or out, he's either part of the investigation or he's a witness, and the car's gone, and that takes her off guard a little bit. So the effort turns on that. She doesn't know where she's at. She's super cooperative, and so at first we issue an ATL, attempt to locate. Let's see if we can find the car, get to Ricky, and have a talk with him and see what he saw or didn't saw or see rather. As it progressed on with that, and we weren't locating him, eventually she assisted us by reporting that car stolen. And this is what I talked about, where it's difficult for somebody, because that gave us a little more flex as far as NCIC goes on containing that car and making a stop of that car and whatnot. Difficult, because I think there was a feeling that he might be involved. And here's a mother who's, again, doing what she can to help us out. She's just lost her husband, and there's probably some suspicion in her mind too that her son might be involved in that. So we end up getting that listed as a stolen car. While we're waiting on the warrant to get there, Sergeant Keith Miller, a fantastic patrol sergeant that I worked with for years, and he worked that area of town. He pops into the truck and starts talking about how he knows Ricky, and he knows a couple of Ricky's friends, which will come up in a minute. And this is the neat thing about when police know. There's a thing we call knowing your beat. Like when they really get to work in a geographical area and they deal with people, they know people. And Keith did, Sergeant Miller did, and he was talking about. He had dealt with Ricky on some really petty crime stuff, stupid chasing. I mean, nothing major. Sure. And then a couple friends he named and everything. I think he had pictures of them. He had pictures of he showed us some jail shots of Ricky, and then a kid named Aaron Mills and Isaac Davis, all about the same age and everything. So it's like, okay, because that's a resource, right?
Absolutely.
That we're like, okay, we're starting to paint a picture here. And, eventually the warrant comes. So FSU can enter. So their team goes in and they start to process the house. And at some point, when they got in and got things settled and got going, is that a couple of us did go in. And then that's when I got to see the recliner in a reclined position, which again, you're looking at is the reasonable assumption, the way the fire department described seeing him, is that a good assumption would be is that Frank was asleep or resting when he was shot. And that's an assumption at that point, but that's where we're at. They start processing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What kind of rounds were used?
I think I'll look in a minute because I'm going to look at notes. It's funny because it's just like being in trial. 38? Yeah.
So revolver rounds.
A revolver, yeah. Okay. Which is interesting, right?
That's actually, I asked. Interesting.
Yeah, because with a revolver, that's different than what a semi-automatic does, right? And the weapon comes in a couple times in this thing that was kind of interesting too. So we take a peek, look, kind of get a feel for it. And I remember being back out in the truck or the lab, and we get a little knock on the door, and it's a man probably in his 50s, and he's the father of one of the two boys that Sergeant Miller talked about. I think, if I remember correctly, he might have been Aaron's father, but I could have that backwards. And he says that I saw all the activity down here. I know who lives here, and they hang out. And he said, he goes, I can't get hold of my son. And he said, he goes, I've been to their apartment. It's right up here on Reading Road, just almost a stone throw from over on Belmead. And there's no answer, but I think he had mentioned that one or two of the cars or something made him think that they're in there, but they're not answering. So that's kind of odd. And so a couple of investigators and patrol people went over there, and I get a call on my cell phone, and it's Paul Williams, and Paul's done a show with us. And I'll never forget that, we're getting ready to get into the evening. We're still going to be working this for quite some time. At the same time, it's the end of the day, and you're starting to go on fumes a little bit. And I remember Paul said, Davey, he goes, we've got 2 more over here. And I said, 2 more what? And he goes, 2 more bodies. And that's where what had happened is that they had got up on a balcony thing and accessed a sliding door, and they found the bodies of Aaron Mills and Isaac Davis. That they
so the
lived.
2 that they couldn't get in contact
That's
with.
it, yeah, which is why. And again, you have to look at it and say that the dad couldn't get in contact with him and suspected, but I'm a big believer in intuition and something. There was that heaviness when he was talking.
Now, were these 2 guys just friends with Ricky?
We put that together later, and also because of again, Sergeant Miller, Keith, talking and knowing that they ran together and it clicked. So you start to fast pace all of that a little bit. And if I have it out of order, that's definitely when we went and got the T-Butt felony auto on the vehicle, because now it was like, okay, everybody's accounted for except Ricky. And now we've got 2 dead people. And so that's, like I said in the beginning, that your first impression is maybe a couple of small expletives like, damn, we're about to get really busy, right? And those collect into mind, because right off the bat there's a nexus. We learned later that of course it was a solid nexus, but you call in more of the cavalry. You just get a little bit busier with it, because now we've got a second crime scene, and actually anything between Belmead and Reading got examined pretty hard, because anything between those 2 points to A to B can be part of a crime scene as well.
Chronologically, which one took place first?
That's where we're going to get into the prosecution theory. We're going to get into the prosecution theory. We had an idea based on the physical evidence and stuff like that we'll talk about, and some of the circumstantial evidence. Ricky had another idea, and you'll learn that in a minute. And we didn't agree with Ricky's idea. He was adamant about it, and we'll get there. But we felt our philosophy that we had looked at again especially when we got with the Commonwealth's attorney, is that Frank was murdered and then the 2 boys were murdered. And we've got a little bit, like I said, some of the physical evidence made us believe that, and some of the circumstances involved believe that. So we're on. I mean, you've got 3 people. The media starts to take a heightened awareness. As a police department, this is when you start to. There's more considerations about what you release, because you've always got that delicate balance of providing information to people and then making sure you don't terrorize a community at the same time. 3 dead people in one town within a couple blocks. The impact on it is pretty good. So those were a lot of the discussions we were having at that time.
So you've got these 3 dead bodies that you've just discovered within minutes of each other.
Minutes, yeah, a couple hours probably, yeah.
But where do you go from there? You've got no Ricky.
Yep.
You've got 2 friends and a stepdad.
Yep.
And no answers.
Yeah. The biggest thing that we're going to look for to get the next set of answers and everything is to locate Ricky Sherroan. And again, he's considered, right? I mean, we're looking at him, but again, we've talked over and over that you don't box in on that. I mean,
right, because it could be that he was with the trio of friends and got kidnapped.
That's it.
We've done another case, Alex Johnson, that got kidnapped.
Our thing is that he's interesting. I don't like the word person of interest. I've never liked that, but he's interesting. But at the same time, we're thinking again that is he hurt? Is right. Ricky hurt? I mean, could we have a 4th somewhere, or has he been hospitalized? Has he found his way because of his association with these people and being some kind of straight too? But he's definitely the next link. So you continue the neighborhood investigation. Now you do a neighborhood investigation on Reading Road near the apartments and everything to see if anybody saw or heard anything. And time starts to pass. We get into the evening, and then we get notified that the car has been seen in Shively, which is just like a 6th-class city or 4th-class city outside Louisville, Kentucky, that some police officers in Shively locate the car in a Royal Inn parking lot in Shively. And that might be just truly off Dixie Highway, which is the main route through there, if you're familiar with that, which is interesting because now we've got the car has jetted and we've got it out of town in another city.
How did they know to make contact, Shively police?
Well, that's why we had the car entered as stolen, is that
so it would flag in their systems as well.
Yeah, if they get message of an ATL, if their radio traffic broadcasts the ATL, and that can happen or not, depending on how busy you are. I can't remember if they had heard the bolo or not, but at some point they ran that tag and they came back as a stolen vehicle. So we get on the phone with them, and it's in this hotel parking lot, and we asked them, can you all set up on it to where you can't be seen? If it moves, stop the car again, because the assumption is that whoever has the car there might be staying at the Royal Inn.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And so can you surveil it? Because boom, we're on our way. And that literally is, we're like, we are going to get to you pretty quick. So a couple of us jump in the car. We actually had a Commonwealth's attorney assistant with us, Kim Bonnell, rode with us into Louisville. One of the things that was neat about this team aspect, and we've had Ray the DA Larson, rest in peace, on the show before, is that our Commonwealth Attorney's Office would come to these to really give you the guidance. It's in some cities you have to run everything through the prosecutor or the DA's office. It was more of a thing that if we make an arrest in a case like this, they will be the one prosecuting. So we want them on the end from the hot skinny in the beginning, and they were great. So Kim Bonnell went on to be a fantastic judge, still is a judge here in town, rides up there with us. So we're off, and we're taking off into the evening, and we're heading to Lively Shively, as we called it when I grew up in Louisville. It was called Lively Shively. We get there, and we pull in, and there's the car in the parking lot, and some Shively police were there, and they parked and looked up on him, but we learned later that Ricky had seen them. So we end up finding out what room somebody had registered in. You know, at that time I still didn't want to even say back then for sure it was Ricky. Somebody had the car, and we find out what room, and we go to the room, and there's no answer, and they open the door for us, and it's vacant. And so now we've got the car. It's getting later in the evening. This is that thing, you know, like we always talk about with the first 48, why this is important, why you just don't call it quits, is that every one of these little threads we're starting to pull has to go, because now we're pretty excited. We've got a vehicle. We've got it in a city. It's not further away, but we still don't have Ricky. And
was he registered to the motel with his real name?
I'd have to go back and look. You know, again, I can't remember if he was or not. I believe he might have been. But that's
So
one
he
of those.
I mean, it's
sneaked out the
suspicious
front
either
door.
way, but if he was registered as Rocky Balboa at the motel registry, that'd be even more shady.
Rocky Balboa. Exactly, yeah.
Should we explain who that is for the young people who may not know?
For you Zoomers out there.
Exactly. Google it, like everything else. Google it. So you're excited because you've got the vehicle, which means we can grab it, we can get it under a search warrant, we can take it back to the bay, and we can process it. And it did get searched and processed later. It didn't yield anything that I recall at all. And so we call that goose eggs. You know, we spend some time there late into the evening and early hours of the morning, and we do an exigent search of the room because, again, nobody's occupying it. Whoever's had it's abandoned it. It's under the control of the hotel, and the hotel can say, yes, you can search that room, and really didn't find anything. I remember at one point, too, that there was a vacant lot behind the hotel, and we walked it all the way back to a little wood line and everything, and I think we found a shoe, and I think we at least photographed it if we didn't take the shoe because we didn't know whose shoe it was. I mean, you just take those things when you see them in a field like that, and gets later and later, and we have nothing. So what we do at that point is we had contact at that point with the Shively Police Department. We made some contact with the Louisville Police Department. They helped us move around town and look at a couple places that were of interest that somebody nefarious could be and whatever. And we saddle up and head back to Lexington. And I remember a bunch of us, we all met at Ramsey's to have breakfast. A lot of murder cases are solved over a meal.
Yeah.
And so we're all there, and this is how it goes. It's like being in the Bay. We're running through everything, and we're like, where are we at? Because the next thing would be, when everybody's been out for that long, is there a break period, a reasonable break period? And if you go too far, the boss will tell you got to go home because you shouldn't be out working on fumes. So we're sitting there and we're like, okay, we're probably there. We've still got some things to do. We still have all that out. And then I want to say the phone rang, but I think it was a pager. The kids will have to Google that too.
They definitely will have to Google it.
But we get another call. We're getting ready to go and we get another call.
Hey, you know there's more to the story, so go download the next episode like the true crime fan that you are.
The Murder Police podcast is hosted by Wendy and David Lyons and was created to honor the lives of crime victims, so their names are never forgotten. It is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lyons. The Murder Police podcast can be found on your favorite Apple or Android podcast platform, as well as at murderpolicepodcast.com, where you will find show notes, transcripts, information about our presenters, and a link to the official Murder Police podcast merch store, where you can purchase a huge variety of Murder Police podcast swag. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, which is closed caption for those that are hearing impaired. Just search for the Murder Police podcast and you will find us. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for more and give us 5 stars and a written review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. Make sure you set your player to automatically download new episodes so you get the new ones as soon as they drop. And please tell your friends. Lock it down, Judy.